Hi, Elaine here. Today I'll share how to create customizable planner rings for your digital planner. Keep watching until the end, and there's a bonus section where I automate the whole editing process using some StudioLink magic. I'm using the same file as I used in the last video where I created a leather look cover, but this time I'll use a double page spread and we'll create some planner rings. So to get going, first thing I'm going to do is use the rounded rectangle tool and draw out a shape. Zoom into that, give it a fill so we can actually see it, and round the corners right down, and then move it to the middle. Now planner rings would have a slight curve on them, so I'm going to right click and convert this shape to curves, which means that I can curve it up slightly, both at the top and the bottom. Next thing to do is to create the punch holes on the left and the right. Now I'm going to use another rounded rectangle. You may be thinking, wouldn't it be better to use a circle? Well, I'm going to make this look like a circle, but there is a reason that I'm using the rounded rectangle. Hang around and you'll find out why. So I'm going to round that down so it does look like a circle. I'm going to give it a grey fill and move it behind the curve. Now it needs to have some depth, so I'm going to duplicate that shape. I'm going to make it smaller, but first I'll give it a black fill so you can actually see it reducing in size. I'm holding down the Command key and the Shift key, and that's scaling it proportionally and around the centre. Then I'm going to add an effect to it, and this is a blur effect. I don't want it too blurry, but I want it just enough so it looks like a shadow. You may wonder why I'm not using the inner shadow, and the reason is I want to be able to move this around independently. So I will, at this point, move this ring up slightly, not quite that much. Let's move it down to about there. The circles together make up the punch hole, so I'm going to group those together and possibly make it fractionally bigger. Perfect. Now, this is one of the holes, and I like naming my layers. There's the first one named. Command and J to duplicate and move across to the other side. But the placement of the shadow means it doesn't look quite right on that right hand side. So what I'll do is I will flip it so it does. And at that point I have two of those, so I'm going to select those, group them together, and again, best practice, name those as the holes. Now this is the planner ring and it says curve. It's going to be very important that I name this particular item. So I'm going to call this planner ring. And we're almost done. There's just one more thing that I want to do, which is the planner ring looks quite flat at the moment. To give it a little depth, I'm going to draw a shape on top of it using the pen tool. So from the centre, you don't have to be that precise with this. I'm going to give it a white fill and change the nodes here. They're quite sharp at the edges. So what I'm going to do is get the node tool, select the node and convert it to a smooth node, top and bottom. That's purely personal choice, completely up to you. And I'll take that down a little bit as well. Then add an effect to it. Again, it's going to be a blur effect, and you can make that as blurry as you like. It's going to be the highlight. So the more blurry it is, the less impact, but it might actually look better. That doesn't look great, but you blur it a little bit more and it looks much better. I think on here, a blur of 10 is going to work perfectly. And close that. That's the last layer that makes up the completed planner ring. So I'll name that. That's the highlight. And then it's a matter of selecting all three of the layers and grouping them together. Doesn't matter what you call this, but I'll call it completed planner ring. And then we know exactly what it is. At that point, we've got one ring. Now, before I start duplicating this, one thing to think about is it would be far better if the colour of the ring was coming from a global colour. So to do that, I am going to double click and keep double clicking until I get to the planner ring. Then add a global colour. Now in this file I already have a document palette. If you don't, then you can go up to the top and add a global colour there, and that will automatically create a document palette for you. But I already have one, so I'm going to add that there, global colour 4. I am going to rename it. So we've created the global colour, but we haven't actually applied it yet. To be certain of that, make sure you've selected the planner ring and click on the planner ring colour. Then we need multiple copies of the planner ring. So with it selected, I'm going to use Command and J. That gives me a copy. It puts it in exactly the same place, and then I get to move it down to where I think it needs to be. Now I need 11 rings on this planner. It's a big style planner, but I don't know the gap between them. I don't know exactly what's required. But if I power duplicate, and I need 11 of them, it will put 11 of them equal distance apart on that spread for me. Obviously that isn't quite right, but if I move the last one down to the bottom and then select all of them, go up to the alignment option on the toolbar, and then in the align vertically options, the one on the right hand side will enable me to space those items vertically, and that will sort it out for me. Having got the rings in place, the next step is what if you want to change the colour? Well, that's why we applied a global colour. If we go into that global colour and edit the fill, you can see they all change colour. And as we keep doing that, you can make them any colour that you choose, which is great as far as it goes. But what if you wanted these rings to have a style applied to them? What's called an object style in Affinity Publisher. Now let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to zoom in and we'll concentrate on this top one. And I'm making sure that I've selected the part of the ring, so the planner ring, that's part of the completed planner ring. And switching to the styles, I have a range of metal styles in here. Gold, silver, bronze, and a range of other colours. But you'll notice what's happening here, it's only applying to one planner ring because that's all that's selected. Now you could go back to your layers and you could open up each of these and find the actual planner ring itself and select it and then apply it. But you would have to do that to each and every one of these groups. It would drive you insane. So let's Command and 0 so we can see all of the planner rings. Object styles in Affinity Publisher are used for applying consistent formatting to objects. Now they're referred to as styles in the interface, and you'll find them in the Styles panel. If your Styles panel isn't showing, you'll need to use Window Styles to see it. These styles are not to be confused with text styles. Currently, and this is the problem, object styles in Affinity Publisher are not editable. Now that can mean that updating multiple objects at once is more of a challenge than it really should be. But it's not impossible. Keep watching. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I have selected just the planner ring, just one of them, and then go to select same, and name. And that is why it was incredibly important that I named that first planner ring. Doesn't matter what you call it, as long as each of them is the same. And obviously they are because I duplicated them. Now they're selected, moving back to styles, and I can style them all at once. So the silver, the bronze, the green, the pink and the blue. Now there is a caveat with that. It's fantastic, but there's a caveat. So what I'm going to do here is select these and copy them, move on to another page and paste them in. So I've got two sets of planner rings. Just so we know what's going on here, I'm going to put on this page, page 4, and make sure that's big enough that we can see it, and copying that, going back to pages 2 and 3, and this one is page 2. Now there's a reason that I'm doing that. Right, if I go through that process again, so I'm going in and I'm selecting just the planner ring, and I go back to select same and choose name, and I make them the pink colour. You might be surprised to discover that it's not only changed these on pages 2 and 3, but it's also changed the ones on pages 4 and 5. The reason is when you make a select same selection, it works across the document. Because of that, that could be what you want. On the other hand, it might not be. And if it's not, there is an alternative. A better way, if you like. The Layer States panel is what we need. To get that in view, you need to go to Window and down to States. And this is it. You have two options. There are queries and captured states. The difference between the two is that queries are dynamic, while captured states are not. I prefer to make a query if possible. It gives me more options in the future. So we have queries, we have captured states. We don't have either at the moment. But down at the bottom, there is an option to add a new query, and next to that, a new captured state. So I'm going to add a query. This one is for the planner rings, so I'll call it planner rings. There are three options with a saved state. You're going to specify criteria to determine what is either selected with the first option, hidden with the second option, or visible with the third option. The criteria are underneath the disclosure triangle. So if I'd given a tag to those layers, I could use that, but I didn't. I don't want to choose a layer type because I've got multiple layers, all of the same type, that I don't want impacted. So I'll keep going down. There is an option for layer name, and as we already know from the select same, we know that the layer name is called planner ring. Now, it doesn't look like anything's happened, and indeed at this stage it hasn't. But what we can now do is go up to here and choose to select. And having specified the criteria, it's much faster than using select same. With them selected, let's make those green. And have a look what has happened on page 2, which is they're green, but pages 4 and 5, they're still pink. Right, why's that happened? That has happened because states have a customizable scope, and that is at the bottom of the dialog box. You have three options: document wide, spread wide, or selection wide. Select same applied to document, but this time it was set to spread, so it's only impacting a single spread. Just something to be aware of. And if that's all you need, you're done. But there is a bonus, and it doesn't involve states or anything else. If you have access to Affinity Designer, then you are able to use StudioLink. Now, StudioLink is a feature of Affinity Publisher that gives you access to Affinity Designer and/or Affinity Photo features from within Affinity Publisher. Now, I need to do a couple of things in here before I move on, which is I'm going to delete all of those. All will become clear. I'm going to focus on this one. And StudioLink is accessible from the top left. You have Designer and you have Photo. Now I'm going to go into Designer. Once I'm in Designer and I select my completed planner ring, I'm going to create something called a symbol. Now my symbol panel's showing. If you need to turn it on, you need to go to Window and down to Symbols. And all I'm going to do is click Create. So I've used StudioLink to get into the Designer toolset, and I've created a symbol. That's it. I'm now going back to Affinity Publisher. It doesn't look like anything has happened, but trust me, it has. So what I now need to do is repeat the process that I did before, which was Command and J, and drag it down, and repeat that for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Move the 11th one to the bottom. Repeat again what I did before, which was alignment, and then space vertically. And I know it looks identical, but this is way more powerful. It allows you to not only change the colours, but also the whole style of the planner rings. One thing to be aware of is that there's no mechanism or interface to create symbols in Affinity Publisher. But the symbols that you've created in Affinity Designer function exactly the same in Affinity Publisher. This means you don't have to use the layer states to select all the elements. It also means that you can make more changes. So let's have a look at that. So again, zooming in so we can see what's going on here. I'm going to edit this. I'm not just going to change the colour. Changing the colours straightforward. If I select the planner ring, and we go into our styles, They will all change just by changing one. But let's make more magic. Right, in here, I'm going to make sure that I have selected, so looking in the layers, what I've got selected, I'm going to select the highlight and the planner ring in just one of these groups. And what I'm going to do is make that much skinnier, and look what's happening. I'm changing one, not the colour now, I'm actually changing the shape of it, and it's changing all of them. I need to move that down a little bit, and I need to duplicate it. And as I duplicate it, you can also see what's happening. It's duplicating it in all of them. So now I've got a double ring, but the holes don't look great. But I can come into here, I can make that a bit taller, so we're giving it room to fit those two new rings, like that. Then I can make sure I've got both highlights and both planner rings selected and move them down a little bit. Looking at that, it would be better if those holes were a slightly different shape, and that was why I used a rounded rectangle and not an ellipse. So I'm aiming for that grey one on the outside, double clicking, and now I've got the radius point, and I'm squaring it off. Doing exactly the same with the other one over here. And that's squared off as well. And all the changes I've made have applied to all of them. But notice, the ones on pages 2 and 3 were symbols. The ones on pages 4 and 5 were not, and they remain unchanged. And that is how you can make and customise planner rings for your digital planners. Let's have a quick recap. I designed the planner ring using shapes. Remember, the rounded rectangle gives you lots of flexibility down the line. Global colours were one way to change multiple design elements without having to do it manually. Select Same Name is another way to change multiple design elements automatically. StudioLink gives you access to Affinity Designer and Affinity Photo tools. And Affinity Designer symbols enable you to not only change colours, but also the whole style of the planner rings. If you want new tutorials and tips and tricks on a regular basis, check out my free training at elainegiles.com/VIP. Hit the subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss future tutorials. And if you have any requests for specific tutorials, be sure to contact me. I would love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.